Okay, hi, I'm Kate,
And I'm Riley, and we're from BYU's Research and Writing Center.
and we are here today to do a little presentation on the ins and outs of tutoring multilingual writers.
Okay, so to start off, we just wanted to give like a little overview about what multilingual writers are. Multilingual writers is like a big umbrella term for a lot of different identities of students who speak more than one language. So, for example, we have bilingual students, and those can be students who grew up speaking two languages at home, or students who grew up speaking one foreign language and have been learning English. There's a lot.
Yeah, and then, multilingual is kind of the same thing. Like, they just speak multiple languages. We also have, like, foreign exchange students. I'm sure, you guys maybe have foreign exchange students at your school, and they probably speak English, but it's not their first language. As well as students who are recent immigrants to the United States or Generation 1.5 students. So this means that they either immigrated when they were like very young into the school system or things like that. So they're not necessarily like brand new to the country, but they're not, necessarily super proficient in English.
Yeah, and that like most of the time Generation 1.5 students, their entire schooling has been done in English up until this point.
Yeah.
Whereas bilingual students or multilingual students might have done some schooling in like a foreign language.
Yeah. So we just wanted to kind of define that term just to say this isn't, this is a broad category of people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Perfect. So the main thing you want to focus on when approaching a tutoring session with an MLW is to think it's all about perspective. There's this additive perspective versus a deficit perspective.
yeah, and these are really important frameworks. So first, to talk about deficit perspective, a deficit perspective is when we might view a student from a lens of their weakness and make assumptions about the type of student they are. So, for example, you might have a multilingual student come in and meet with you at your writing center, and you might feel a little bit nervous because maybe they don't speak super good English, maybe they speak with an accent, and you might make an assumption about them that means that they're not smart or that they are not a good writer, which is not the perspective that we want to be having.
Perfect. Yeah, that kind of perspective just leads us to like reinforce certain stereotypes, and it justifies these systemic inequities of like English being the smarter language or something, which just isn't true. And having this perspective also leads to lowering your expectations for the student, just because they maybe don't have the same language knowledge. Like if you reduce those expectations, then they're not going to meet the requirements they need to for the assignment, even though they could be very well capable of it.
So true. So what we want to have is an additive perspective, and this is a perspective that allows for and expects possibility of growth and improvement, but comes from a strengths-focused perspective. So, we kind of have this metaphor here of the toolbox. So everyone has different tools in their toolbox, and it can be really helpful to think of MLW students as people who have this maybe extra tool of knowing another language or having like different language skills. That's kind of something they're coming with and bringing to the table that is going to like help them out. Maybe they have a different perspective on language and on writing than you do. And there's just different things that they can understand because they have this additional language knowledge.
Yeah, and in addition to that, you want to use the tools that the multilingual writer is bringing into the session. So if they can better express their thoughts in a foreign language, like let them get all those thoughts out in writing in their native language, and then you can work about like translating them later, but let them use their tools and let them know that that's enough, and that's just part of a process into creating a product that is acceptable for the assignment.
Yeah, that's so true. We have a couple different ways that we're going to talk about now for how to approach multilingual writer tutoring. So here's 4 of them. So the first one, just breathe. You've got this. I know that tutoring MLW students can feel a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're in a middle school or high school. This might not be something that you're doing regularly. But just remember that you're a peer tutor. Like, you don't have to have all the answers to everything, and work together with your student. Kind of like Riley was saying, it can be really helpful to just think of the assets that your student does bring to the table. Like, maybe have them explain things or write them in their native language if that's going to help them out. That can be a really great tip.
Yeah. And then our second tip is to just get to know the student. It is important that you make the student feel comfortable. Sometimes MLW students get super self-conscious that they might not know English as well as their peers. So just making them feel comfortable, get to know them and be their friend, let them know that they're capable of achieving like meeting the requirements for the assignment with your help. And just as you get to know them, learn how they feel about writing, what things might come easier to them, what things might come harder, the main things that they are personally struggling with it, to just kind of frame and get to know them and make them feel comfortable so you can have an open and honest discussion about writing.
So true. Number 3, set some goals for your session. So, you might have a multilingual student come in with a paper they've been working on, and you might feel overwhelmed because it has a lot of grammar errors or just a lot of structural things that are maybe different, and you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. So ask the student what they are most struggling with. Ask them what they most want help with. Remember, it is not your job to tackle every single thing. You don't have to do that. You just want to help the student really with what they're looking for help on. And addressing the concerns that they have coming into the sessions will lead to a more positive and productive experience if you can do that. And yeah, if the student doesn't have any concerns or any specific goals they want to work on for their writing, just ask them about their general writing process. What is something that they have had a hard time doing with writing in the past? What is maybe some feedback, positive or negative feedback that they've gotten in the past? And you can kind of use that knowledge to think, okay, maybe I need to focus on this aspect of the student's writing, or maybe I need to focus on a different aspect of their writing.
Yes, and finally, a lot of MLW students are concerned with their grammar errors. Something that's super scary sometimes about English is how many weird and tricky grammar rules that come up in English, and it is important to address these concerns. So prioritize correcting errors that keep a reader from understanding their ideas. So if a student comes in with a lot of mistakes in their paper from grammar errors, and it's impossible to get to all of them in a session, prioritize the ones that get in the way of understanding their ideas. You want to make sure that you can still understand what they're trying to say, even if there are a couple grammar concerns, right? And then another common way to do this is to identify common error patterns. So if they're constantly using a wrong verb form, kind of making that connection with them and be okay, I'm noticing that you're using past tense a lot of the time when you mean to use present tense. Here's what this word actually would be, and here's how we can fix it. That way, lumping them in patterns makes it a lot easier on you and the student, because it becomes something that all these little errors that you need to fix, so there's this one overarching problem that you can address, right?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite tip that I use really often when I'm working with MLW students, is definitely just identifying patterns. So now we're just going to talk about a couple of really common patterns that we've seen working with multilingual students, and these can just be helpful patterns that maybe you should be familiar with. And, it can be good to find some more resources on this. And even if you're in a session and you're noticing one of these patterns, it's okay to just look it up or something like that, just so that you can help, that student understand it as well as yourself. So
this first one is verb form, and this is kind of tricky. There's these regular versus irregular verbs. So regular verbs use this added ed for past tense, while irregular verbs don't follow this rule. So begin, began, and begun don't use ed at the end, but oh my gosh, I can't think of an example. I can sum up something in the present, or I summed it up in the past, So, for example, an incorrect form would be she singed a song, but a correct form would be she sang a song, right? Or incorrect, I tell him already is present tense, right? And correct is I told them already. Oh my gosh. And then, verb tense errors, using present tense with words that indicate a past tense action.
Yeah, so just making sure those verb tenses can be really helpful.
Yeah. And then subject-verb agreement. Singular subjects need a verb that has an S at the end for a singular verb, and plural subjects need plural verbs, which is no S, which can kind of be confusing when you think of S at the end of nouns to add as a plural form, right? So for example, a singular would be the cat chases the mouse, or the plural would be the cat chased the mouse. The cats chase the mouse, right? And an incorrect form of this would be Claire are winning. Claire is just one person, so the correct form would be Claire is winning, right?
Yep. And then this next one is determiners. So these are kind of tricky, but determiners are words placed before nouns to clarify their reference, specifying definiteness, quantity, ownership, or proximity. So these are just words like the, a, and, just some of these words that we sometimes don't think about. And really commonly something that we see is multilingual writers will omit these words because they don't, or they use like the wrong form of it because they don't know how to use determiners. They're just very confusing. But yeah, oftentimes like they will just forget to add the determiner when it does need to be there. So for example, articles like the, a, or an, we obviously know, if you're talking about something like you wouldn't just say dog, you would say the dog or a dog. So just correcting that. And then quantifiers, these are words that kind of determine like how much of something there is. So you might say some cookies or there are few cookies instead of just like there are cookies. It's like there are some or there are many cookies, just kind of specifying how much of something there is. And then possessives, these are determiners that kind of say what, like who owns something. So I might say my phone or his phone or their phones, plural. That kind of just determines what something belongs to. And then demonstratives, this, that, these, and those, kind of just, again, clarifying like the position of like this. I might say this phone that's right in front of me or that computer on the desk over there. Is kind of what those are used for. So just making sure that MLWs are like using those in their writing. And then this last one is sentence structure is something that I have found for myself helps in my own tutoring a lot. So just, again, sentence structure can be really tricky. If you've ever tried to write in a different language, oftentimes other languages have different structures to like the way their sentences are. And so this can be really, really tricky and confusing. And so sometimes what I've seen a lot is it can be helpful to just clarify a couple of really basic things. So sometimes, we all write run-on sentences. Those are really common. And so I like to help MLW students learn how to break up those sentences in a couple of easy ways. So one is just adding a coordinating or subordinating conjunction with a comma. So that might be like, and comma or but comma, like just phrases like that to connect, two parts of your sentence. And then another really common error that we see is a comma splice. That is where you connect two independent clauses with just a comma, and in reality they either need to be two separate sentences or you can actually connect them with a semicolon. So if you have two independent sentences that are connected to each other, and you maybe just want to have like a stop there, but you don't want it to be two separate sentences, you can do a semicolon there. So we have this example here that says, Sam studied for his exam, comma, he felt confident. Those are two independent sentences, right? Like they can each stand on their own. So some ways we could change it is by adding the coordinating conjunction comma. So Sam studied for his exam, comma, so he felt confident, right? That's connecting them. Or we can use a semicolon. Sam studied for his exam, he felt confident. With that semicolon just kind of indicating, hey, these two ideas are still connected to each other. And then, of course, you can just break things up into two sentences. So that's another really helpful one. Just break it up. If the sentences are, you don't necessarily need them to be in the same sentence, the two independent clauses, just make it two sentences.
Okay, awesome. And that's all we have for you today. Hopefully this was helpful. But at the end of the day, like with these big giant grammar concerns, if you don't understand why an error is wrong, look it up with your student. There's no shame in that. Okay, take the time to understand it with your student and help them understand that it's okay that they don't understand this grammar concept, and we're all in the process of becoming better writers.
Yep, so true. All right, thanks for listening, guys.